hockey. Yeah.
My favorite.
It's Judd's Hockey Show.
That's right. It's Judd's Hockey Show. We're recording this on Sunday morning after the Wild wins again, because when a team is this hot, it's just mandatory that you do more podcasts, especially when they're not just hot, but they are creating news. And as we wake up this morning, the Wild is now tied the Jets for first place in points, 36 points in the National Hockey League, which is an incredible start for them. We will get to that. We'll talk about the game last night, as they've won now 3 consecutive games. They beat the Predators in what was a very entertaining game last night, AJ Fredrickson. But let's start with the trade that came down yesterday, and I'm going to lay the groundwork for what the trade was that Bill Guerin decided to make, and then I'm going to turn it to you for the expert analysis, prospect analysis on this one. So after it had been rumored for, a couple of weeks at least, that the Wild was pursuing defenseman David Jiricek. Now you could find that his name, as we talked about off mic, is pronounced in his native tongue, David, but it appears that the North American way has won out again. So we will go with David until we're told not to. And the Wild also get a 5th-round selection in the 2025 NHL draft from the Blue Jackets. In exchange, they send defenseman Daemon Hunt, who had been up occasionally but was mostly playing for the Iowa team in the American Hockey League, a 1st-round pick in the upcoming draft. Now, it's top 5 protected, but with the way the Wild's going, I would say it's very safe bet that the Wild is going to give up that 1st-round pick. A 3rd-round pick in 2026 that was acquired from the Avalanche. A 4th-round pick in 2026 that had been acquired from Toronto, and a 2nd-round pick that is the Wild's own in 2027. So probably a lot more focus on the draft pick compensation than the player. I believe Mike Russo of the Athletic had reported that there were 6 or 7 teams after Jiricek. At the end of the day, Bill Guerin wanted him badly. Right-handed shot defenseman. Your thoughts on the trade, both long and short term, and what does he potentially bring, and what might concern you?
Well, the biggest thing there that people might be up in arms about is the 1st-round pick going there. Let's all remember that this man was a 6th overall draft selection only in 2022. Like, he is so very shortly removed from the juniors draft eligible status. He's 21 years old. He's a 6'4" defenseman, right-handed shot, which I think we'll talk about here maybe in a few minutes about how that can maybe congest things for this season and how that maybe complicates things for an in-season trade. If this was off-season, I don't think anybody would be batting an eye. But when it comes to sending a 1st-round pick, Bill Guerin said this yesterday, quote, "It was a no-brainer." And I think that's reasonable. This guy still has the potential. He hasn't crossed any over any hills yet. It's a guy that had, in his draft year, sustained a knee injury at the IIHF World Hockey Championships. So that kind of derailed his season, but he came back strong. He came back just fine from what I understand. I know the Wild, he said that they had him at their number 5 spot overall on their big board. Didn't have a chance to get him, weren't going to get him. Now they do get him. But he is a bigger 6'4" defender who moves very well. I will give him that. The positives that are he moves well. He's very good on his feet. He's pretty solid when it comes to man-on-man coverage. So when that winger is maybe streaking up the ice, he's got to drive him out wide. You can rely on him to do that. But the biggest problem, I think, is that he will stray defensively from where he should be most of the time. You see it right now in the Wild's penalty kill, where even yesterday, the man up front is right out top on top of the goaltender is not picked up. They score. That's more than likely the same thing you're going to get with Jiricek. So I would say that it's not like he's coming into new territory. He's not the only one that's going to be doing that. But I would assume that the Wild feel confident and their staff feel confident that they're going to be able to coach him up to kind of shore up some of these defensive lapses. Because this guy, I think, is somebody that maybe leans more offensively minded. He's got a cannon of a shot. I don't know if it's necessarily what Matt Dumba had, before his shoulder injury, Judd, but he does have a very good shot from the blue line. He's got good vision, so he can move the puck. He has special teams capability, which Bill Guerin touched on yesterday when discussing the trade. And he has kind of that physicality. And when you look at maybe the decor of the past, Jared Spurgeon obviously still there, but then, I mean, Kalen Addison was a staple for a point on this, the defensive line. It's an immediate upgrade in size. He can play a physical game, and I think that's what Bill Guerin also does like about it. And I can't quote him verbatim, but he had a nice quote about, it's one thing to be big, but you can be big and bad, or you can be big and good. And this guy, he said, is big, skilled, and that's exactly the type of guy that I think a lot of teams are going to want in their decor once he does progress, and what the Wild hope he's going to get to.
So I think the potential is intriguing. Like, I think, again, to your point, offensive, like the offensive thing in today's game is huge. Now you have to be responsible defensively, so that becomes incredibly important. And I would guess that, as we talked about at the game last night in the press box, there gets to be a point where like the GM is like potential, and the coach is like, well, yeah, but I can't play a guy who defensively is not, responsible in my structure. So here's my question. What do you think the concern should be? Because this could be based partially on incompetence, or it could be based on what the real concern here is. So this kid, the 6th overall pick in a draft, should probably, once he gets, you would think a lot of times, once he gets to the National League, should stay there, or you would like to see that. Now, Columbus, not a franchise exactly teeming with a ton of talent, had him with the Cleveland Monsters quite a bit. And what interests me is that he was drafted by the administration that was run by previous GM Jarmo Kekalainen. And then Don Waddell, who came from Carolina and took over Columbus, who, I think is a very respected prospect. Yeah. He is certainly not incompetent. Mm-hmm. So 2 administrations, including the one that drafted him, basically said, you know what, we don't think that this kid can play here. Now, that doesn't mean he never could. But, I mean, do you think that should be a red flag at all, that this is based on potential? Because we have all seen teams think, I can fix him. Just send him to me. I'll fix him. And sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're wrong. So what's your take on the fact that two different Columbus Blue Jackets administrations sort of said, you know what, right now, kid, you are probably belong in the American Hockey League?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think it's more of a coin flip, because we don't really have a track record, I would say, of like Bill Guerin maybe taking this similar of a situation. We've seen the Wild do in the past. How many like previous Matt Boldy-esque type players have we seen maybe shipped off, and all of a sudden Charlie Coyle now has made a pretty decent career himself out in Boston, or Alex Tuck. I mean, granted, I don't know if the Wild necessarily like gave up on him in a sense, but they felt they were backed into a corner with that expansion draft for Vegas. He goes there, and now he is the captain or an assistant captain, making a pretty good name for himself in Buffalo for a team that still feels like it's finding its footing. But the Wild, I think, based on the structure they play, it sets Jiricek up for success. And this maybe is going to sound like a shot at Columbus and their organization, but I feel like they're still like finding their identity. Obviously, they drafted Fantilli, and then under Kekalainen a couple years ago, I feel like they reached and they draft that Igor Chinikov, who like draft coverage teams had zero package for, and they were like, I don't know where this guy came out of. So like they're still kind of in that they're rebuilding, but they also have a couple decent pieces. But the Wild, I think the coaching wise and how they set up, and that D room, I think, is going to really benefit them. I mean, if you look at, for instance, the Vikings, to take an example of a team across town, they have a great coach that is able to connect with quarterbacks, and you've seen what Kevin O'Connell has done with Sam Darnold. Daniel Jones just signs with them, and the hope is that he's able to do something with his career off of this, and just being in a room where you have that's kind of like all that brain power, that savviness with KOC, and then now what Sam Darnold has done, being able to kind of mold into reviving his career. Maybe that's the same thing here. And I don't want to say that it needs a revival of his career, because he's 21. He really hasn't gotten a shot. Right. If you look at his track record here, after being drafted, he played 59 games, 4 of which were in the National League, 55 down in the AHL. The next year was more of a even split-ish, with majority of that going to the big club in Columbus. And then this year he's only played 10 games. I think we really have yet to see exactly what this guy is. But I think based on draft packages, based off what we've seen before, I think he's set up for a lot of success here. So I do think that the Wild coaching staff, what they do with their team now, makes me lean more in the positive, where they're probably going to get the better out of this kid rather than, they just traded 4 picks, and Daemon Hunt is not like,
right.
He really was in a bad situation here based on the numbers on that defensive side. So I'm glad that he's going to probably go get some time to play on a pro team consistently. But I don't think we're going to be sitting here a year from now thinking, what a terrible trade that was. I can't believe he gave away a first round. And also that first rounder is more than likely going to be a late first round pick. Yes. And if they want a defensive prospect, there's only going to be 2, maybe 3 in that top 15-ish that are like key prospects.
So the interesting thing to me about that draft pick, and although it's conditional, it's gone. So like first of all, they're not going to be top 5, but if they did fall apart, you then can't say, well, we fell apart. And so now we're going to get that draft pick back in, let's say, April. That draft pick is gone. It can't be dealt with. So that being said, the thing that intrigues me, and this question was asked of Garen yesterday, was, that is the currency for a deadline trade that's now gone. So like more so than, oh my God, they traded a first round draft pick. It's more like, when did you want to use that poker chip? And they did it on a prospect. One, I think it speaks to the relative confidence that Hines and Garen have in the current roster, which is well-founded. They played very well. Now guys do get hurt, and we've seen guys hurt, and so that's been an issue. But the only thing that like stopped me a little bit with the draft pick was not the first rounder itself. It was more like, is that where you wanted to fire that bullet? Yeah. Because if you do have injuries, you could always use more depth. Now, the one thing I will say that you have to be careful of is, you do have to be careful of trying to make a splash trade at the deadline for the sake of that splash trade, because we've all seen the chemistry on this team go out the window before. So I get that. But, when we're talking about potential deals, I mean, we not jokingly, but just in fun, threw out Crosby a couple of weeks ago. Someone's going to want a first round draft pick back. So you don't have that now. But that is really the only thing that stopped me. Like, it's not the picks. To your point, it's not Hunt. It's more of like, okay, you traded that pick now for a prospect. And this leads into my next point, Age, which I think is the most important thing. And we talked extensively throughout the night at the game last night about, like, how does this work? It sounds like he's going to be up on Monday. I think I saw a tweet this morning that
that sounds right.
Reported that Jiricek's going to be called up on Monday. He's going to be here. He's going to practice, blah, blah, blah. But my first thought was, like, how does this work? Because when you look at the Wild's defensive core right now, and more importantly, probably the right-handed shots. So Brodin, who is a left-handed shot, who when healthy pairs with Spurgeon, who is a right-handed shot. But Brodin is out right now, okay? So your defensive pairings last night, let's just use that as an example with Brodin out. Okay. Faber, a right-handed shot, who's going absolutely nowhere playing time-wise, with Middleton. Spurgeon, who scored again, 3rd goal in 2 games last night, a right-handed shot with Declan Chisholm, who's been a very pleasant surprise, scored his, first goal of the season last night, has played really well, responsibly. That's proving to be a great sort of under-the-radar trade from the Jets, who basically just ran out of room. And then the third pairing was Zach Bogosian, a right-handed shot, who I think Hines likes a lot because he's just old and savvy and sort of knows what he's doing. John Merrill, a left-handed shot. Now, obviously, when Brodin comes back, Merrill and or Chisholm, and I would say it's Merrill right now, is the odd man out. But right-handed shots-wise, Faber, Spurgeon, Bogosian. So where is Jiricek going to slot in is the question. And the more I thought about this late last night, do I think he'll get a chance to play? Yes. but I think this is 100% a trade made. One, if Spurgeon gets hurt again, which is quite possible, like he is, we've talked about his maintenance routine coming off the hip and the back. And two, you look into the crystal ball, right, in a year or so, and now you got Faber, Zibuiam, Jiricek. Like, this just screams, if he can contribute this year, that's cool. I think he probably goes back down at some point, too.
Mm-hmm.
But this just screams doing, and the Wild, this is, just to be clear here, this is the right thing. This team is popping right now, but I mean, this is more about the future than the present. This really, really, to me, talks about next year and long term now. You've got a guy that can potentially replace Spurgeon as a right-handed shot, and he is about twice the size, which doesn't hurt, of Jared
No
Spurgeon.
kidding. Yeah,
That's how I see it.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people that I saw, you see 4 draft picks go one way, and you kind of get this like, oh, they're paying so much. I saw somebody already compared to like the Rudy Gobert trade with the Wolves and stuff like that. This guy has his whole career in front of him, so let's just take a deep breath in that regard. But yeah, I think the idea would be, and this is probably something that Bill Guerin has thought about. You don't just make this trade and then figure it out on the fly. Like, and he said it came together not quick in a sense.
Right.
Like, this was drawn out, and they had to go back and forth debating on, what's the return, what are they sending, all this stuff. So I'm sure this is something he weighed as well. But the long term, this trade looks amazing. Short term, it's they have, I'm sure they have some sort of a plan. I bet you he does go down to the AHL after they get a look. But I mean, I would rather have that depth and that option, because late in the season, how many times have we seen this team maybe get in a what we feel is a solid positioning? They have good foothold right before the playoffs, and then maybe that last 2 weeks, somebody goes into the end wall wrong, and all of a sudden they're banged up and they're not 100%. Or you get in that first round and that first game, because it's such hard nitty gritty hockey in the playoffs, somebody does get banged up. This is now an extra body that is capable, if on paper at least, like capable of filling in so that you have that depth and there's not a huge drop off. If Jared Spurgeon does re-aggravate something, you're not bringing up like a Carson Lambos in hopes that he's going to be able to fill the role. And I think that's something too, that back to the trading chip, those guys seem now expendable, where it's Ryan O'Rourke, Carson Lambos, who haven't really panned out, that maybe other teams view them as, they were late first rounders, but, I think in Ryan O'Rourke's case, a second rounder. A change of scenery could be beneficial for them. And we are, paper thin when it comes to defensive prospects. That could be something where Bill Guerin's able to move one of them, because it's just a surplus now from what seemed 24 hours ago. They were, an empty cart. So I think a good supporting cast there and the low expectations are going to be good for the rest of the season. And then this trade, officially, you can start judging it in a sense, more in depth, at least next season, that 25-26, when you do have him integrated and you have that plan of, it's not on the fly, we're acquiring him because the window is open right now and maybe the value isn't there later on and all this other stuff. It's going to be weird to see where he gets forced in, because I think Zach Bogosian, compared to last year, has definitely had a drop off in his playing quality, but it does feel like you're going to want to keep him in because Bill Guerin likes him. John Hynes likes him for that. I mean, we saw it walking out of the Hines presser last night. He's shooting the breeze with Steven Stamkos, 2 guys that have won the cup because they have that veteran savvy. They've been there before. They know what it takes to win. That's what you need in a lineup. You can't just have all skill all the time. And not that he doesn't, it's just that veteran ability, I think, weighs a little heavier, even if it's a third pair deep pairing.
Just get that shot on net, Zach. That's the only
Please
thing, because it's a howitzer, and every once in a while when it's on net, it goes in. But oh my God, is that thing wide? So yeah, Jiricek, 6'4", 204. I think the thing that impresses me the most, and I think that this was probably a huge thing in the scouting world, was that he was named the top defenseman at the 2023 World Juniors and was named to the all-star team. And age, as you know, I am a big World Juniors guy. So if you are named, if you are named to an all-star team there, you're pretty damn good. So, all right, let's talk about the game from last night. But before we do, I want to talk about our friends here at Nicolay Law, because they know when you or a loved one gets injured, ordinary life can come to a stop and things can get complicated. There's Russ right there walking US Bank Stadium before the Vikings game or something like that. During that time, insurance companies, they're likely to pressure you. They don't care if you get better. They don't care if your medical bills are piling up, and they don't care that you may not be able to work. Nicolay Law does, and they've seen every play the insurance companies have. They'll make sure you get the compensation you deserve after an accident. So if you've been injured, get Minnesota's local award-winning injury lawyers. Get Nicolay. Start your path to winning at nicolaylaw.com or give them a call, 1-855-NICOLAY, nicolaylaw.com. That's NICOLET.com. All right, 2 days, 2 games. Age, they beat the Blackhawks. The Wild does Friday. We did a podcast after that. They obviously didn't come out great, but ultimately they win. Last night, it was funny because Nashville, which is having a terrible season, actually looked at times pretty good. They also looked at times like they were, how can I put this nicely with their skill, uninspired. I told you this. They remind me of a lot of Wild teams from past years. It's like you got the talent, but you lose an OT. You got the talent, but you'll lose by a goal. More importantly, home team side, though. This is, I don't know what the definition of a wagon is, because this might not be a wagon, but this team just continually comes out and plays solid games. They never seem to get too high. They don't seem to get too low. Nothing like a traditional Wild team. And we did a lot of praise of Kaprizov on Friday, so I'll keep this brief here. But my God. So he scores a goal. He scores a power play goal while being tied up with one hand on the stick. This guy's strong as an ox. Yeah. He's got basically one hand on the stick. He redirects a pass in. At least that's what I saw. And on the game-winning goal in overtime by Spurgeon, he makes a pass that, Spurgeon admitted post-game, I thought he was going to shoot.
Yeah.
It's why you always have to be prepared. But he makes another one of these passes. I said this on Friday. I will say it again. Kaprizov's game one is not substantially. That's probably too strong. It is better than I've ever seen it. And where he is substantially better, and you made a great observation last night, is the passing game. As you said last night in the press box, he used to do the cycle circle, right? He was just, it was incredible to watch because he'd play keep away. He was that good. But that has turned into passes now. And I don't know where this Gretzky I see the play develop a second and a half before you do came from. But he is literally making passes to guys. It's like a top-notch NFL QB who throws a receiver open, and you're like, but how did that work?
Yeah.
That's Kaprizov's passes now. So just a shout out there to what we saw last night, because that was another phenomenal performance.
I think we could just do a show every day for like 20, 30 minutes.
And 5 shots too. And 5 shots too. Just
he's and we saw him do stuff defensively. It was on Friday night. He had that play that he picks off the pass. They go the other way. That kickstarts the comeback. Last night, in Judd, the small things like the hand-eye ability, because that pass up the wall to him to spring the 2-on-1 and OT, it's like kind of at waist height. He bats it down out of midair, controls it while doing so. And then it's a backhand saucer over the sprawled out Roman Yossi, trying to block the passing lane. It's just, you could break down every single little thing he did, and it's perfection. He's just on a different level this season. I didn't think we could get to this, but he is one of the best players in the NHL. The Hart Trophy conversation that we've had a couple of times,
right now, MVP.
Absolutely. I don't want to keep just saying it because I'm sure some people are getting tired of it. Maybe people aren't, because when's the last time you had a Minnesota Wild player like this fully cemented in the Hart Trophy race?
Never.
Come December. But he's just what a gift in the late rounds that has been prolific since his arrival.
Chuck Fletcher, baby. So the one thing though is Kaprizov did slack off. So on Friday he plays 25-36, more than anyone else, which is absolutely for a forward. Like defensemen ordinarily eat that up, right?
Mhm.
Not a forward. Last night 21-34. So he did slack off a little bit last night. I mean,
How dare he get off nights?
I know. How disappointing. Another thing I want to bring up with you is this, because Hines was, it feels like it's becoming a narrative or a theme, and I don't agree with it. So, first of all, Hines is doing a marvelous job of ducking. I shouldn't say that. He's not even getting credit. Like no one's really asking him about what he's done. Okay. But but in the post game press conference, we're talking about the depth. The depth is better. The depth is better. Well, number one, I don't know that's the case. Like a lot of if you look at the roster from John Merrill's still playing. John Merrill had to play last year too. Yes, the Wild has had injuries. They have managed it very well. This is not to take a thing away from them. But, the fourth line, yeah, it's a little bit more veteran-like. Devin Shore's had a couple, he's played a bunch of games.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, the Wild's had guys like Devin Shore before. It's not new.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the depth, now is the depth playing better? Absolutely. But I think we are selling John Hynes way short here. I think what this is a couple of things. One is the goaltender's been great, but that's also because the structure is improved, and the goaltender's been great. Like, let's not take away from Gus. But I think the other thing, too, is more so it's everyone knows their role. I think Hines is the guy that gets the credit for the demeanor here. We've seen a bunch of these guys go up and down before. So it's not, and are they maturing? Yes, probably. They get credit for that. And you have a superstar now who is playing like a top 3 player. I mean, he might be the best player. He is the best player right now in the entire league. But I don't know that I'm willing to buy that they just, we got all these fourth liners that are great players now. I feel like this roster with Kaprizov is very much like the last couple. The difference is I think they're incredibly well coached. I think they have structure. And most importantly, and this is the thing, you don't have to scream and yell, AJ. I think they have a coach who basically at some point in time said, we're done with the BS. I think we're done with it. We're going to play. It's way too long of season for you kids to act like teenagers. This isn't going well. I didn't get my this. I didn't get my that. Mm-hmm. We are far enough now in the past from certain people being in that room who you don't want. Spurgeon is definitely just more of a calming type of guy, I think. So that's fine as a captain.
Yeah.
But I think the difference is from day one of camp, the coach said we have an early 7-game trip. It's going to be hard. It's a hard game to play. When we get to the playoffs, it gets harder. We could talk about that at some point in time. But the reality is I'm not buying they added all these fourth line guys that are going to be great players. I think this is a seismic change in the mentality that this team has, foisted upon it by a coach who's he's a tactician, and he was done with the BS.
Yeah, and if you look at last night's lineup, the 3 names that are there that weren't last season, Devin Shore, Ben Jones, who were both AHL call-ups and for injuries, and then Yakov Trenin, who was the off-season acquisition. It's John Hynes. It's John Hynes, Judd. And the thing that I've noticed about him is this is maybe a terrible analogy, but it's the same thing as how scientists and pets say pets take habits after their owners, right? If you have a Labrador and you're a sprinter, if you go out and run a lot, your dog's going to be prone to probably running a lot because you go out and you take them, blah, blah, blah. Same thing here in a sense. And bear with me, coach and team in the NHL, because in the past, I mean, think of the most recent the Minnesota Wild coaches, Bruce Boudreau, Dean Evison. Bruce we've seen him on NHL Network. He's a good personality wise. He's good talking. Right. But we've also seen the clips of in the locker room when they covered him with the Capitals, where he'll sometimes get after his team and, woe is me, but he'll get on their case a little bit. Right. Dean Evison, I think we know, was very businesslike, but I would imagine that he had that temper maybe flip and he would lay into guys at times and whatnot. John Hynes, whether it's, us talking to him before the season, last night after the game, every press conference, him discussing the team, he's very business-like. He's very CEO-like, where there's really no emotion. I know what needs to get done. We're just going to talk about it, and then let's look through. Almost like I'm looking past you to let's focus on the game already at tomorrow. And I think that is being taken off by a lot of the team. Philip Gustafson, I know a lot of the coverage of him this year has been everything is business-like. Everything is show up to the rink and it's routine and everything. I would say that's probably a reflection of what John Hynes has done since taking over as Wild head coach. In the locker room, same thing. We talk. I think it was Sarah last night who asked him about after the Winnipeg loss. Like, they didn't really fall into a rut. They immediately got themselves back up. They don't linger on that stuff. It's whether they win, whether they lose, we're going to push forward because the next game is the biggest one for us. It's very business-like. You're not going to sit around and, oh, hey, remember that? Hey, Kirill, that was an amazing backhand pass to me the other night. They're not going to be talking about that in 2 days from now.
Or complaining, or feeling to go back to Boods, feeling sorry for yourself, which seems to be a theme in the sport sometimes. No, it's just, I think there's two things. One is I think when training camp started, and this is where completing the season with a long runway last year probably helps. I think when training camp started, he basically said, okay, we're done with the crap here. And the second thing is he is a tactician. I think in retrospect, I think Boudreau lost his job because he wasn't a great tactician at all. I think he was he was a fun coach to cover. Don't get me wrong. Like you said, great personality. Mm-hmm. But then I think that mistakenly Billy thought that Dean was more of a tactician. And Dean, the biggest difference, and I've watched this. So if you're like, well, what are you talking about? Give me an example. What are you talking about between Dean and John Hynes? Because I like Dean. I'll give you one. Mm-hmm. Watch when the Wild gets what they can probably feel is screwed on a call. Watch behind the bench. John Hynes will at times not berate. He will talk to the official about it, but you never see the facial contortions.
For instance, on Friday at the end of the game, the conversation after the Foligno waved off icicle, there was, I think if that's Dean Evison, we see a heirloom tomato, bright red face laying into Chris Lee, the head referee, what are you talking about? John Hynes, it seemed, you could tell he was maybe a little I don't know what that call is, but it was.
But you can't change it. You can't get hung up on it. If you get hung up on it, your players are going to do too.
It seemed like his immediate reaction was, okay, I recognize and you recognize that you messed up. But where's that face-off going to be? Because it can't be in our own zone because it wasn't icing. So okay, now we're going to have it center ice. Okay, that's a consolation I can live with. Let's just move on. You're exactly right. That is a great point.
And then your players can't, they're pissed off, but they can't, then that's the thing is Dean sort of gave the team license to be brats, to be babies about it. John Hynes has no time for that. And I do think ultimately he is way more of a tactical coach than Dean or Bruce were. So that's good. Okay, last thing before we're done, I just want to give a shout out. He took a penalty last night. He was probably out of position a bit on the first goal. But Yakov Trenin, welcome to the season. Evidently, if the Wild plays teams that you played for, I can't wait for the first Avs game because they only gave him a little bit of time there. But what an indictment. We have now seen that you can play. That's the Yakov Trenin. And here's my sense. I think Age that if he plays the way that he should play, he's probably going to take some penalties because he's playing super aggressively. And I'd like to see him with the defensive responsibility on goal 1, as we discussed. But that being said, I will take that Yakov Trenin 10 out of 10 times. We have finally seen the guy that got a 4-year contract. And at least now I feel like I got to peek behind the curtain. And it makes a little more sense. Just don't do the Andrew Wiggins thing and only get up for games against teams that might have spurned you.
Last night was just refreshing. I know that we, and myself very much included on this, have been super harsh on Trenin in his play so far. And it's why did they sign him?
Yeah.
I don't know what they saw, because this is not the player that I think anybody was. If I see that more nights than not, that's fine.
The third line. How about that line?
That was a rock fire line. Like, I'm still questioning. I never heard an explanation about the initial fight between Shen and Foligno, what caused that, but that doesn't matter. But that third line,
I wasn't going to elaborate on that either last night.
No. But that third line has been amazing the past 3-4 games now. Like, and Trennan showing up, makes all the difference.
Yes.
I'm sure he's not, because if he has been at this point, I'm sure he's turned us off. But Yakov, if you're watching, I just want that level of effort. I don't think anybody's expecting you to be Pavel Datsyuk out there. All I need you to do is just show that effort. There was hard forechecking, finishing your checks. The back checking was great for the most part, besides that one goal. And even then, I think it was more you just got caught out of position on it. So he just doesn't have the speed to get back to recover there. But we know he's not a super skilled all-star who's going to be doing. I just want that level of hustle, right? Like, in Judd, we've noticed this for him getting off the ice. Like, even getting off the ice, it's like, can we get a little more effort there? We're just like coasting to the bench. Granted, I know a lot of other people do, but after the shift that he puts out, it's like you should have a little bit left in the tank. Like last night when he gets off and you can tell he's a little winded, it's because I knew he was working, and that was the biggest thing. Just give me that more nights than not, Yakov, and I will happily have you slotted into that third line on the penalty kill, and I'll get off your back. This is the Yakov Trennan that I think I can live with for the next 4 years.
Yes.
That's all I want.
And that third line last night in a playoff game is one of the great third. I love that third line in a playoff game. Now, I don't want you to take penalties, but he's going. But you got to sort of accept that from guys like that at times.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, my God, the effort, and because they work so hard, they create scoring chances almost by accident, just because they're working so hard. So yeah, Yakov, just sort of repeat, like, if we can get 75% of that the next game, I'll feel really good. I have a bad feeling, though. It's because you were going to show the Predators, and now you showed them, and I am fearful of what's next. All right, Age, great stuff. Thank you. We'll be back soon, probably Tuesday, with Jesse Pierce to talk about a team. Now, just if you're consuming this on Sunday afternoon before the Vikings game or during it, just to be clear, the Jets do play on Sunday night. So if you're listening to this on Monday and the Wild is 2 points out of first place in the entire league, it's because the Jets won. I believe they play the Dallas Stars. But that's it for Judd's Hockey Show. AJ, Judd, we'll see you later.